Are you ready to talk about percents and how they can convert to decimals and fractions? I am. Let's do it. Percent, the definition of it, is a ratio of a number to 100. And if you look at the actual word percent, per is for every or out of, and cent literally is 100. Centimeter, right? Or century, 100 years. So we're looking at numbers out of 100. So when we're asked to convert each percentage here to a fraction and then to a decimal, we're really asked to think of the number as out of 100. So if I'm given 38%, it's really 38 compared to 100 as a ratio. So as a fraction, I would write that as 38 compared to 100, or 38 per 100. To write this as a fraction, we normally write that in simplest form. So I'm going to reduce this with the greatest common factor of 2. And if I divide both the numerator and the denominator by 2, I will get 19/50ths, which is the fraction in simplest form equal to 38%. Now, how do we convert? I figure we'll do all this at once. How do we convert a percent into a decimal? Well, you can use your fraction understanding. If we have the 38% is 38 for every 100, or 38 per 100, that's the same as saying 38 100ths, right? Or 38 hundredths. And what's 38 100ths? Or 38 hundredths as a decimal? 0.38. At the end of this video, I'll show you why we could also use a trick a lot of teachers show, which is you start with your decimal point here and move it over 2 places to the left. 1, 2. That's a trick. I'll go over why that works at the end of this video if you want a little bonus coverage. Let's do the rest of these problems. We've got 10%. Let's convert that into a fraction. Well, 10% is really 10 for each 100, or 10 per 100. And that's it. As a fraction, we can reduce that though. 10 out of 100 shares a GCF of 10. So I'm going to divide both the numerator and denominator by 10, and we will get 1 out of 10. So 1/10 is equivalent to 10%, or 10 for every 100. Now, how do we convert that into a decimal? Again, I know this is 10 out of 100, or 10 hundredths. As a decimal, 10 hundredths is 0.10, and because we have 0 in the hundredths place, we could also write that as 0.1. Not too bad, right? Converting percents into decimals or into fractions. So let's take a look at 67%. That is 67 per 100. So that would be equal to 67 100ths. 67 and 100, neither of those have a common factor between each other that is greater than 1, so we cannot reduce that fraction anymore. So that is the fraction form of 67%. Looking at that, I'm going to convert it into a decimal. We read that as 67 hundredths, which is the same as 0.67. There you have it, guys, how to convert percentages using the literal translation of what percent for every 100 means. We convert into fractions and into decimals. Stay tuned. On the other side of this clip, I'm going to give you another way of converting percentages into decimals, where you can skip using a fraction, but really you're using the same idea as what we did here. I just figure I'll show you in case a teacher goes over it with that method. As promised, here is a quick explanation behind the trick of moving decimal points to convert from percentage to decimal. This is a trick that is often taught by many teachers, but I think it's important that we also teach why it works. So, to convert a percentage into a decimal, there's another way we can look at it. You take the decimal point that is right there, and you move it 2 places to the left. That's it. And so you get the equivalent decimal of 0.38. The question is, why does that work? Well, if you take a look at it, we'll go back to what we talked about earlier in this video. 38% is 38 per 100. And when you divide by 100, we can look at that as 38 hundredths. Well, if we're going to say how many hundredths we have, and we started out with 38 hundredths, then we would have to move the decimal place over 2 places to the left to see how many hundredths I have. So that's one explanation as to why this trick works. A second way of looking at it is, if I divide by 100, each decimal place moved to the left is a representation of dividing by 10 and then dividing by 10 again. So I divide by 10 and I divide by another 10, which is dividing by 100 overall. So that's why that trick works. Personally, I like to look at percentages from the perspective of a fraction because it gives me a better understanding overall of how fractions, decimals, and percents all relate. So I look at 38% and think 38 out of 100 is 38 hundredths and go right to there. There you have it, y'all. The trick unmasked.